Dutton was absolutely provoking.
Yeah.
I literally was like, girl, you want him to fight you. You want him to like physically react. When she said, I literally wrote the quote, a man would have walked away. I'm like, if I entered that with my brothers, I know I am absolutely asking. I want them to rebuttal. Like, that is the only reason why you say a statement like that, is because you're wanting, you're not trying to lull, and mull things over. You are wanting a reaction.
Hello, Adison.
Always my favorite thing. And I hope everyone else enjoys your gusty intros as well.
I try to be hail fellow, well met. My mom and dad always taught me that was a good quality to have. So
it is.
Yeah.
Well, let's kick things off with your favorite portion, and my favorite portion too, because my favorite is getting to hear the winner's affirmation. Yeah. But what was last week's trivia question, and who won?
Staff at tasteofcountry.com is always the place to answer trivia. But last week I asked a pretty simple, pretty easy trivia question in terms of it was easy to find out online if you didn't automatically know the answer. And it was this. We'll soon learn about Casey Dutton's military record. He's a former Navy SEAL, and this is the second time that actor Luke Grimes has played a Navy SEAL. What was the first time? And the correct answer was the movie American Sniper, which I think was 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. And congratulations to Hayden, who knew the right answer. She hit us up on email. YouTube is also a great place to answer those questions as well. And we just take the first answer every time. So Hayden, congratulations. She's a long-time listener. So I've exchanged emails with her for a long time. She may have even answered a trivia question correctly before. But Hayden, you know the drill. This is your day, Hayden. We're all celebrating Hayden today. Put your Go Hayden Go posters up above your garage. It is Hayden's Day, a parade down Main Street for Hayden, who is doing all the things right on this day today. Queen Hayden, have yourselves a damn day. Get it, girl.
Billy and the whistling.
This is so much more fun now that people can actually see.
I know. It's not just me absorbing.
Yeah.
What is this week's trivia question?
Well, it goes back to a conversation we had during last week's episode. We were talking about the one man on the reservation who had the voice, like the funny voice, the voice that didn't seem to match the body, if you recall. We spent a little bit of time commenting about that. That actor's name is, apologize if I mispronounce this, Takala Black Elk, and his character on Yellowstone is Sam Stands Alone. He was the man with the voice that didn't seem to match the body, and we've actually seen this actor before and talked about him before on this very podcast in previous seasons. Where and why did we see actor Takala Black Elk in a Yellowstone franchise episode?
You and I have talked about him?
In depth. We spent quite a bit of time on this particular scene. It's a very important scene as it relates to the franchise.
I'm going to have to sleep on that one.
Yeah, well, you don't have time. If you sleep on it, you're going to lose, Adison. It is not going to be your day. It'll be someone else's. But if you can tell me
you're so
what
right.
show he was on and particularly just kind of describe the scene and the characters he was with, I'll give you credit for it. Staff at tasteofcountry.com or in the YouTube comment section.
All right, Billy, let's dive straight into episode 2. Give us a little synopsis, and then you and I can kind of cover what we individually took away from it or questions we might have.
Okay, yeah. Episode 2 for me was a cleanup episode. Like the whole episode was spent sort of cleaning up the mess made at the episode 1 where Lee is killed. But then Casey comes in and shoots Robert Long. They got to cover up that murder, which in effect is what it was, even though it was in self-defense in a lot of ways that would have been really tough to explain. The paramedics or the medical examiner has discovered that Lee wouldn't have been able to shoot Robert because the bullet that he took would have paralyzed him. So they figure out there must have been a third shooter and want to know who was that third shooter. Obviously, it was Casey, so this is a big issue. John puts Jamie in charge of sort of the cover-up, and Jamie does a pretty good job of hopping into action and putting things into motion, and he kind of skirts that line of legality. Actually, he really crosses it, but he makes the attorney general think he's skirting that line. They have to figure out what to do with a couple of things. One is what to do with Lee's body, because Lee's body, someone could re-examine that and come to the same findings as the medical examiner. So they dig up Lee's body, and I don't know, what is that thing they put him in? How would you describe tactfully what they do with Lee's body?
Well, essentially it's a cremation, but for a horse is what I took that as.
I think the furnace, is that what you would call that thing?
Yeah, one big pizza oven. Yes, a furnace.
Kind of what it is. Like it's meant for horses, but they put Lee's body in there to cremate it.
And the whole thing about it is, I don't even know the like actual technical term of, it's not medical examiner. I don't know what you would say of who. What was the terminology for, or like, you see what I'm saying? Like the profession of the man who was doing what he was doing. It takes a significant amount of heat to decompose a horse. Well, you put a human in there and it's going to take half the time. I mean, or not even half the time. Literally the guy says like, this should be done in what, like 10 minutes?
Yeah.
I don't know the exact timing, but essentially we're like express heating this bad boy.
It gets the job done. And obviously they can't go through
Yes.
like a normal, like, is that a mortician maybe? Like a mortician would do that normally, maybe? Cremator.
They would do the cremation?
We'll just call him a cremator.
Yeah, cremator. Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, they can't go to a normal person because that would kind of trigger some red flags. So they have to kind of go to someone who's friendly to the Duttons. And then along the way, John has to convince or even bribe people to change their story. And the first person he talks to is a friend who is the father of one of the guys, saying that they saw someone coming up on a horse. And that guy essentially just says, tell me what to say by tomorrow morning. That's all that he's going to say. Done and done. The other person is a priest, and he essentially blackmails a priest.
Yeah. Did we ever, well, I don't know if I should have asked the question now, but did we ever, what was John blackmailing him for? He just said, like, you owe me a favor.
That's all we know, is that a favor was owed. John comes knocking for that favor. The priest delivers a sermon that is very specific to one member of his flock's situation, and it totally works, which is amazing. The guy even says, like, I feel like that was said just to me, and like
convicted. Yeah,
that was that. Like, all things good, like, don't have to worry about it, and that works. So check there. The body is the third thing, and then the medical examiner is the fourth thing, and that's when Rip shows up in black gloves. And whenever Rip shows up in black gloves, you're in trouble. He kind of convinces the guy to go along with this murder scheme and makes it look like a suicide, and that even ends up working. Like, I was stunned there as well. Like the first time it was a really believable sequence. The second time through, it's like, wow, this guy was really cool with just, today's my time to die.
Right, where he's like, all right, where Rip pretty much says, like, you wanted to die anyways. And the guy's like, has this epiphany of like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Just let me smoke one more of these embalming fluid soaked cigarettes and I'll be good to go. Thanks, boss. That's what he does.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, in the Dutton family world, the first time you try to take care of something, somehow it goes as planned. So far.
So all of this works, but there was one thing, and this is one scene I can't get out of my mind, is the look that John gives Jamie as Lee's body first goes into the furnace. He gives him this long sort of, you messed this up kind of stare. And Jamie really didn't. Like, Jamie handled this about as well as you possibly can. I don't know why John was so angry with Jamie in this sequence.
So I actually took that a little differently. I took that as we are in deeper than we realize, kind of like a commonality of we're sharing a glance that we know we are in over our head. Because you're right, Jamie didn't do, I mean, Jamie's doing the best that he can. And the fact that I am remotely on Jamie's side is, might want to check my pulse. So yeah, I didn't take that as much as John looking at Jamie of like, you've really screwed this up. It was more so this like understanding of, let's hope this works. This is behind us. This is really like we're in deep.
Could it be that both things are true? That John meant it that way, but Jamie interpreted it as his father not approving of the job he's done? Because where Jamie's going next,
Totally.
these next few episodes, like all of his insecurities are starting to fly. He even tells Beth, like, his dad never looked at him like he looked at Lee. And then there's some things that are going to happen later in season 1 that really kind of Jamie just finds Jamie sort of unraveling.
Yeah, and I could see it like you just said. I wouldn't do it the other way around of John being like, you really mess this up. I definitely think it could be John looking at him as if we're in deep, and then Jamie receiving that as, well, great. My dad thinks I messed up. Like, he's ticked. While we're on the cremation part, just because I wanted to be knowledgeable, I did Google who cremates horses. With over 28 years of experience, this is from Midwest Cremation Services. With over 28 years of experience performing equine cremation, it's called, oh, wait. I might have just made myself an idiot.
You just plugged a company there. What are you getting, like a side paycheck here from that company? You're like, oh, I thought I had something, but in the end, all I did is just give this company some extra business.
I did.
Okay.
I thought it was gonna give me the name of the like who performs it.
Right. Like, what's the profession?
Yeah, what's the profession? That's what I originally looked up, but never mind. We're just gonna move on.
I would think it's like an animal mortician.
Yeah, it's actually just not. It's not giving me anything. So it just asked me who actually cremates their horses. So we're going to move on.
The other part about episode 2 that we really kind of zoom in on is Rip and Beth's romance begins to kind of take some sort of shape. Like before they were kind of just on and off again partners, but now they go on this date where Beth chases wolves. And that's a thing
casual
she does.
That's what I do, Billy. On my first dates, I go, let's go chase some wolves.
But she has a couple of lines in this episode that I think maybe really remember. Like the one line is, "It's only the things I love that die, Rip, never me." And like we start to see that immediately with episode 3 that we'll get to here in a second. But then I kind of wonder if maybe that's even some foreshadowing about how this whole series is going to wrap up. Like she's so loyal to her dad, and we don't know this yet, so it's not a spoiler. Like these events haven't played out. Like maybe like John Dutton and Rip ultimately in the series finale, maybe they die as well.
I could unfortunately see that.
Yeah, I there has been a few moments like that throughout this rewatching of season 1 where I've been like, oh, maybe that applies. Now I want to believe that's true, but like also like the way seasons like 4 and 5 start to become written, it feels like in some ways Taylor Sheridan's trying to build the plane as he's falling from the sky. So maybe I'm just being a little optimistic, but I don't know. It seems like there's some connections there.
I think what was interesting for me, and I didn't know this until this episode, is realizing that Beth and John talk about the fact, John lets Beth in on the situation, and Beth says, well, we got to do what we need to do. Casey was Mom's favorite, and so we pledged to protect him. And I just think that I just didn't know that Casey was his mom's favorite. And we'll talk about this, I guess, in episode 3. And as the season so far has continued, it is like, I didn't realize how much of the favorite Casey, like all 3 kids now, or I guess, sorry, 2, Jamie and Beth, are here to protect Casey, all as a like commitment to their mother.
Beth, the mother, she seems to be a real piece of work. Like in terms of her, honestly, her mothering techniques, not like this isn't like standard parenting. Like she would not win a Mother of the Year award. Like she is cruel, and I don't want to get into episode 3 quite yet because I want to do something else. I know, but we'll get there. But she does seem to have some cruel tactics, not only in this episode but in some later episodes with Beth that are coming up. But Staff at
What do you want
tasteofcountry.com if you have some response to that. But I have a new segment I'd like to introduce.
to? Ooh, yes, please.
It's called Don't Worry About It.
Love it. I know where we're headed.
There are some things that happened in episode 2, and then they're going to happen in episode 3 and through on that seem important. But I'm here to tell you that you don't have to waste a lot of energy worrying about it. So we're just kind of gloss over some things that happened in episode 2 that seemed exciting to a first-time watcher. But without spoiling it, I'm just going to say, don't worry about it. Yeah. Example.
Mm-hmm.
Tate's dinosaur. Don't worry about it.
It's not coming back. All right. I can't say that I lost sleep. Oh, you want to know what, Billy? Could be a don't worry about it. Longtime listeners will absolutely relate to this statement. You know what we don't need to worry about, Billy? Lugnut boy.
Yeah. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about
That's
it.
season 3, but you're right.
Yeah. I just had to add it in. Yeah. What else for episode 2?
Casey's phone call to his former military commander, who I believe is a Navy SEAL captain. Don't worry about it.
Cool. Cool.
These are small spoilers. I do understand, but they're also just saving you a little bit of a time. And then the last one I have is, and at the time I thought this was going to be a big problem. Casey exchanges gun slides with that police chief, with the reservation police chief. Like, I think that's going to be a huge thing. Like, he goes on to help kill that meth guy, but then he also shoots a few guys in episode 3. And that seems like it's going to be an issue, but don't worry about it.
That one's less of a don't worry about it, but you will get an answer for.
Kind of. But we never goes back around to the slides actually being an issue.
Oh.
They never track that gun or trace that gun again.
Cool.
But now on the flip side of this, there is one thing that you really should kind of lean into every time you see it happen. And we see it happen, I think, 3 times now. Anytime Casey is around a wolf.
Yep.
Pay attention to that. And it happens with episode 2 with the wolf on the highway. In episode 3, he's guarding his mom. And then I think in episode 4, there's even a wolf scene, which we'll talk about next week. But there is something that comes of Casey and the wolf. And it's going to be a few seasons. Do worry about that. That's meaningful. That is worth sort of paying attention to, and just file a little bit back of your mind for now, I think, about all these wolf sequences.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that note, moving into episode 3, which was titled No Good Horses. This was one that you have the opening scene, and I'll let you kind of take it from here, but where we actually even see Beth's mother. I don't feel like she has any cameo before now. We see, we know that she exists, but she's no longer in the picture. Episode 3 is where we find kind of what went wrong. Why did she die? Billy, that was a hard scene for me to watch. Hard, but at the same time, I will say the mom already kind of annoyed me on how she treated Beth and all the above. So that sounds really brutal. I can't say I didn't shed a tear like I shed when Elsa died.
I am kind of curious to get your take on that. As a daughter, watching that exchange between Beth and her mother is probably a different experience than me, who, is a totally different perspective on the account that I'm a son, not a daughter. What was your sort of experience watching how Evelyn Dutton is her name? She belittles her daughter in a lot of ways and makes her feel like she's just not strong enough or brave enough. And her level of tough love is beyond anything I've certainly experienced or witnessed.
Well, and realizing my mom did a really, really good job. I mean, she still does a good job as I'm an adult, but when I was growing up, of kind of the sky was the limit, and was so affirming to my dreams or what I wanted to do, that literally, I mean, even the career I'm pursuing was all thanks to my mom just really encouraging me to do it. Yeah. And I think that is absolutely, nurtured, when you go nature versus nurture, I absolutely think that's nurtured. And so when I was watching that with Beth, and, I've seen season 4 and then the A of season 5. And I think when I saw that, I understood. I'm like, I get why Beth. I'm not okaying Beth's, how she lives her life. There's cold refinement, and we could have worked through that. But now understanding how Beth's mom treated her, I'm like, in her formative years, we just see that kind of one clip.
Yeah.
But obviously, Beth is, what a let's say elementary age, that that's been going on before then. And so that's something that's drilled into you since you were little, that now that I see Beth, I'm like, I kind of understand why you're the way that you are.
Totally. Yep. So to kind of reset the scene, it's a flashback sequence, and this is the first one of these. We get a lot of them throughout Yellowstone early seasons, and they're really wonderful. But it's Beth and Casey and her mom kind of on a horse, and there's some sort of situation where Beth tries to open the gate and she's struggling with her horse, and her mom is already telling her she's too afraid of the horse, and the horse is picking up on it. Beth walks through the gate. What happens after that is never really clear to me, like how Evelyn actually dies. Like, it seems like the horse falls on Evelyn and maybe that leads to her death, but like what the actual cause of death is, I don't think is ever really stated. It's just a bunch of events that led to it. Beth goes to get her dad, and they don't find Evelyn, and she's being guarded by Casey at the time until dark. By that, it's far too late, and Evelyn dies there. But it's a sad scene, but a lot of questions left sort of unanswered. But it certainly does sort of lead us to the Beth Dutton we know today.
Well, and essentially, so kind of like filling in some gaps here, is when the mom's dying, she pretty much, Beth is looking over her, and she tells Beth, essentially, this is all your fault. Which, oh my gosh, talk about, the last few moments of your mom being on Earth and telling you, her death is your fault.
Yep.
You can't, and no therapy can fully, like, that person can never come back and rewrite what they said. And so, and I think to your point, us never fully understand how she died. I was a little confused. I'm like, I don't really understand how this is Beth's fault, other than how I took that as like, it probably wasn't Beth's fault, but the mom is just so like I literally can't even, unfathomably angry towards her daughter that anything that goes wrong is going to be Beth's fault. But then also, I don't know if you felt this way, but I didn't realize that Casey stayed until his mom died, essentially. And interesting, and I don't necessarily have an answer for this unless you do, of like, did that carry on at all as he got older, of like PTSD or anything like that? Like, Casey's kind of seems unscathed emotionally about it, and I would be very scarred.
Well, Casey has some PTSD for other reasons that we learn about, but
correct,
it doesn't ever seem to be anything based on that. Related. Like, he seems to be pretty as well off as you can be emotionally after that experience, and doesn't even really, a lot of the issues he has with his dad don't seem to come from that.
Stem from the mom.
Other things that happened, but he does seem to be pretty strong, a good protector of it, which is interesting.
This was definitely, and we can just kind of take it from here of what else happened. But this was a heavy episode. We kick it off with that. And then next we see Casey and Tate driving along the road. He sees a van on the reservation, right? It was on the reservation? That's right. And what was he saying? Like, laws don't exist on the reservation and people can get away with stuff that they shouldn't, right?
That was the idea. Yeah. Like, people might, it's almost like a safe haven for like people who don't live on the reservation. They can come commit some crimes because they can get away with it because there's no cooperation between the reservation police and normal state police. That's what he was getting at. And the people he comes upon are, as we find out, would be rapists of a girl who lives on the reservation. They don't get along with it, but Casey kind of interrupts the whole thing and kills the men, and they have to bury it. And this whole exchange is almost a don't worry about it, save that it does kind of show how Casey, he never flat out murders some people for like malicious reasons. Like, almost everybody Casey kills is a justified killing. And that's kind of true throughout the series. There's probably some examples where that's not necessarily the case, but those two men, it was a justified killing. And you're going to find out that he ends up kind of being okay with it. But that goes through the sequence. And I don't know, after this episode, I think that whole thing is kind of put to bed for the most part. That's why I say it's an almost don't worry about it.
Yeah, we won't get into spoilers, but I do think you'll want to be aware of it enough for episode 4. Wait.
Yeah, episode 4 is next.
Yeah. I was like, wait. I think that's when it all happens.
The part that does, I think, well, Thomas goes to jail for a little bit, and there's a sequence where John tells him, if you want to steal the cattle, now you get the bull. I thought that was an eye-rolling line there from John Dutton. But he gives the cattle back, and Thomas ultimately gets out of jail, so he ends up being a free man. The other part of this episode that I think is really important is this whole play about who's going to get into politics as the district attorney for the state of Montana. Like, Jamie really wants that job and wants to run, but John wants to give it to Beth, which is a really, really big curveball, and it offends Jamie. They end up having this huge fight out in the barn, and that gets really ugly, and Jamie hits her after a lot of goading. How did that scene make you feel? Like, Beth really, really, really goads him, and then Jamie, he hits her, which is awful. But I don't know, I felt a little bit bad for Jamie, and I don't know if I should have. Like, I didn't know how to feel there.
I did. So, okay, I have 2 younger siblings, and my brothers have never, they were taught that at a very young age, if you do not hit a female. But I will say, like, because I grew up with 2 brothers, I had to hold my own, and none of the Haager kiddos ever, like, swung at each other. Like, that's how we started it.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think we, like, if we ever hit each other, it was like a push or a slap. Like, I've never been fisted with my brothers and vice versa. But definitely we've had like clashings before where we just are like roughhousing, and it gets, so I also kind of felt bad for Jamie. Beth Dutton was absolutely provoking.
Yeah.
I literally was like, girl, you want him to fight you. You want him to like physically react. When she said, I literally wrote the quote, a man would have walked away. I'm like, if I entered that with my brothers, I know I am absolutely asking. I want them to rebuttal. Like, that is the only reason why you say a statement like that, is because you're not trying to lull, and mull things over. You are wanting a reaction. So for that, I say Beth opened that opportunity.
And then she went and tattled on him and told John Dutton too. So like the whole thing, like, her behavior was really poor. Like, obviously he shouldn't have hit her.
Correct.
But it was like I don't know, it was a really complicated scene to emotionally sort of navigate.
I just don't understand. Well, I guess I don't understand this, but I think Beth 100% gets a rise out of conflict. Whether it's with her dad, whether it's with Rip. Like, her relationship with Rip could be normal and, like, not settled around conflict. Like, I think that's the only reason why the relationship is working, is because they're always at odds. And half the time she is literally asking for it. Rip is more of, like, an even keel human.
Yeah. Don't
mess with Rip, but he's generally an even keel human, where half the fights I'm like, girly pop. Like, Beth is not someone who I'd actually call girly pop to her face, but like, it wasn't needed.
She's provoking.
It was not needed.
She's provoking, and Jamie's totally right that she's sort of a cancer to the family, and it's this interplay between Beth and Jamie that I think really, I don't think I realized the first time I watched it how important that was to sort of the thread of the show. It becomes sort of the main plot line in season 5, and it's a subplot right now, but it's kind of not the subplot. It is sort of the dominant plot. You just don't notice it in these early seasons, because it's not always right there in front of you. But it leads to very much where Jamie's headed and some of John's decisions, and then there's the whole Beth and Rip thing. Like, you can make a case that Beth's the main character.
I think what was interesting, and was it Thomas Rainwater or Dan Jenkins who said this is kind of the episode that we learn about the inheritance tax. He's going to tax, and actually,
Rainwater says that.
Is it Rainwater who essentially is like, the inheritance tax is going to be so insane that your family couldn't afford it. Like, come hell or high water, I will find a way to not let your family own the ranch. And I think that kind of sets up the fundamentals. Like, we already see episode 1 that there is clash between like the reservation and the Dutton ranch. And I think though that statement in this episode really lays the groundwork for truly what John is fighting for all seasons.
So before we get to fan Q&A, a couple things to look forward to with episode 4 is we are introduced to the train station, and we get a full explanation about what that's going to be, and that is super exciting. Episode 4 is a really, really good episode, and it was hard for me not to talk about episode 4 in this podcast because it is sort of it's a seminal episode. Like, there's things that happen. Like, it's a big Lloyd episode, and Lloyd's really good. The train station, like, I'm really excited to talk about